Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you are notified each time we have a new upload on YouTube. And today's episode is dedicated to Shamsa. We'd like to thank you for your continued support and generosity. And if you'd like to support the channel, we have a Streamlabs link in the description below. Make a donation of any dollar amount, ask a question, we will answer it at the end of the episode. Donate $100 or more, and we will dedicate the episode to you. And today's episode is once again dedicated to Shamsa. And I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
What's going on, Nate? Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. And we have a special guest for this episode. We have Microsoft's 1 million man, Rand Al Thor.
And thanks for having me on, Nate, MVG. It's always a pleasure talking video games with you guys.
Yeah, we had to bring you on for this one because we are going to give our thoughts and predictions for Microsoft's upcoming E3 2021 presentation. And as we know with Microsoft's presentations in recent years, they're always good on paper, but somehow fail in execution. And hopefully Microsoft is able to buck the trend this year. And how we're going to start today's conversation is let's get the bad news out of the way first. Let's discuss what will not be at the Microsoft presser. And I will start off with the big one. From Software's Elden Ring will not be at Microsoft's presentation, but it will be shown this month and very likely as early as this week, but not part of E3. Instead, it will be shown as part of Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest, and I want to know your thoughts on that possibility unfolding. And we'll start with Rand.
I'm surprised Elden Ring even exists at this point. Yeah, it's interesting that you would think Xbox being the big show out of all these in the upcoming E3 week, that Elden Ring would be there, considering it was debuted, I believe, is it 2018 when it was debuted? Right? It was like 3 years ago at this point?
2018.
Quite a while. So to be at Summer Games Fest, I wonder if Jeff Keighley had to pull some strings, because that's a big get. I mean, usually Summer Games Fest doesn't have like the big games, but there is a lot of hype behind Elden Ring. So for him to get that is a major thing. And I know everybody wants to see the trailer for it. I do too, after playing Sekiro and Bloodborne. I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Souls, but I do love me Sekiro. So I kind of want to see if this is more in line with Dark Souls or more in line with Sekiro, or at least a combination of the two, because I do like their world building. I just don't like the slower gameplay that Dark Souls has. I prefer the faster combat of Sekiro. But I'm interested in seeing what the game finally looks like outside of grainy potato cam footage that leaked out, what was it, like a month ago now? So I'm excited.
Yeah, that internal footage that leaked out, I believe it was around March. That was just for internal presentations for marketing purpose within Bandai Namco. And what do you think, MVG? Do you think we see Elden Ring at Summer Game Fest, or do you think Microsoft somehow maneuvered a trailer into their presentation?
No, I think it's at Summer Game Fest. Friend of the show, Jeff Grubb's been talking about it as well, that Keighley's got it. That was his words. So I feel like it is Summer Games Fest. And honestly, I'm just glad that we're going to see it. Finally, we're going to get to see this game. Other than, like Rand said, the grainy potato trailer that we saw last time. So yeah, I'm not really too fussed where we see this, but I am happy that Summer Games Fest is going to show this game finally, because it's been a long time.
Yeah, it definitely has. It feels as though it fell victim to the infamous George R.R. Martin delay, and those who are familiar with the Game of Thrones series or the line of books will know that it takes him many, many years to finish a book. We've been waiting, I believe, in the area of 10 years now for him to release his upcoming novel, and there's no end in sight for that. So maybe he got a little delayed on writing some of the scenarios for this game, but that's a joke. I'm sure it went over the heads of a lot of people. Another project I'm not anticipating at Microsoft's show is Ninja Theory's Hellblade 2. This is something we have not seen since the Xbox Series X initial debut at the Game Awards back in, what was that now?
End of 2019.
Yeah, 2019. Yep. So it's been a while since we've seen Ninja Theory give any update. They have discussed the game a couple of times since then, but they've used the exact same trailer footage, and they just do like a development diary. But we did see some cloud footage recently appeared from Ninja Theory on Twitter talking about how they're mapping and using weather effects for the game. So it's clear that development is making progress, but we do know it has shifted to Unreal Engine 5. And this is an engine that only recently became available in beta form to developers. So we're likely still looking at a somewhat lengthy wait until this game comes to retail and consoles.
What do you think, Rand?
I think one of the reasons we haven't seen much of it, or it won't be at E3, is because I think they were really affected by mocap during the pandemic. Mocap basically kind of stopped, and that game relies heavily on motion capture. So I think that's probably one of the big reasons why that game is probably more delayed to 2023, and we won't see anything more of it because they don't have any substantial gameplay, which is what people want to see. So it's probably more behind the scenes type of footage that they submitted, maybe a cinematic. And after the feedback that Xbox received last year with their showcase about how too much of it was CGI stuff, I think Xbox wanted to shy away from having something that would be considered CGI for a game that they had revealed, in 2019. So it's probably best to be like, okay, maybe you can upload that footage that you submitted to your YouTube channel as part of a diary. But so I think Nate's right here. I think Hellblade 2 doesn't show up. I think it probably gets its proper unveil for the first time next year. And I think that's largely due because they just couldn't do mocap for most of last year. So there was nothing really substantial they could show,
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, It's obvious that this game is under heavy development right now. The switch to Unreal Engine 5 is significant. The kind of the tech tweets that they give us with what they're working on. It's obvious that right now is not the right time to show anything. But yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll see something from Hellblade this year. I don't know what that will be. Maybe some, development update or some, a new trailer or something, or maybe just some little tech demo or something that they'll show us. But yeah, E3 is not the time for this game.
And another game I'm not anticipating to be at the show is Obsidian's Avowed. This was debuted, I believe, during Microsoft's last summer press event. It wasn't E3. It was just, I guess it was part of Summer Game Fest, if we want to consider it that. And I mean, I'm really torn on this one because I'd love to see it. The game is further in development than many people believe. So I wish it would make an appearance at E3, but I'm not anticipating anything from Avowed. But we will see something from Obsidian at the show. And that's a topic we will get into later in the show. But do either of you think there is any chance Avowed makes either a trailer or a gameplay presentation during Microsoft's press event?
No.
I thought there was a good chance it would, like a month ago, but I don't think they will. I think it's certainly possible because I think Phil talked about the potential for multiple events this year. There's still the VGAs coming up at the end of the year. There's the possibility Xbox also does another XO after skipping last year. So my co-host of the Xbox 2, Jez Corden, said that he knows that pretty much all the studios, or at least most of the studios, submitted something for a lot of their games for E3. And I think Obsidian did submit something for Avowed, and it's certainly possible that maybe Microsoft decided to hold off on it and show it at a different event that maybe they're planning this year. And that maybe Obsidian themselves wanted to announce Outer Worlds 2 instead of showing something from Avowed. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't think we'll see anything from Avowed at the show, but it's possible maybe we see it later in the year. At least I hope so, because I really do want to see what that game looks like.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
Not at E3, but maybe something later on this year.
It seems like a good candidate for XO if Microsoft does bring that back this year, because you do want to save some big announcements for those future type of events. And more projects I'm not expecting at E3 are the recently announced Fable and Perfect Dark. These are titles I don't think we hear from again. Probably, I don't even know if we hear from them in 2021, maybe towards the end of the year at like the Game Awards. But I think we're in for a fairly lengthy wait until we get a meaningful and substantial update on those two projects.
Agree. Yeah, I don't think we hear back from Fable for a while. I mean, we didn't see much last time. We just saw the announcement, really. So it's going to be a while before we hear from Fable again.
Man, we're just ripping the Band-Aid off for people, huh?
Yeah, let's
like, hey, man, they're going to tune into the show, and it's like, hey, guys, guess what? This isn't here. This ain't here. This ain't here. In here. Okay. Yeah, Fable's farther away, I think. I think Fable is 2023, potentially 2024, I guess, depending on how all these things go. They're building up the second studio over at Playground, and they want to get this game right. A lot is riding on it, right? So we got the CGI reveal last year. I think we'll get the gameplay reveal next year, 2022. I think, and MVG, you'd know more than me, but I think COVID impacted a lot of game development, and especially impacted games that were ready to, developers that were, trying to show stuff off for the C3. I just saw something that like Warner Brothers basically confirmed today that Suicide Squad and the Batman game and a couple other games like Harry Potter won't be at their showcase this year.
Yeah.
And those were games that were shown the year before. So I think the pandemic and work from home has really impacted not only what games are like releasing with all these delays, but what they could show and what they could get ready for like a vertical slice. And I think Fable's just one of those titles where they're just like, we don't want to waste the resources trying to polish up some sort of E3 gameplay demo or vertical slice. We'd rather just hunker down and focus on making Fable the best it possibly can be. And we'll probably see it for sure next year.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, to prepare a E3 demo that's not a trailer, it takes resources, right? It's going to take X number of resources off the dev team to get a trailer ready to go, and that has to be curated, and it has to work, and it has to be QA'd, right? So it doesn't crash or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I think the focus really is just heads down trying to get these games, done as quickly as they can. So not necessarily be distracted by an E3 demo at this time if it's not really something that is that important to them, I will say. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that one, Rand.
Now that we've hit the listener with the large bucket of ice water and have completely dampened their hopes and dreams for Microsoft's E3 conference, now it's time to shift into some hope. And what is going to be at the show. And there's plenty to be excited about with this show. But I wanted to open with, let's bring things down to that grounded level before people go in expecting everything in the sky and under Microsoft's umbrella to be at the show. And we're going to start with some of the potential Game Pass announcements. And I will start with Battlefield 6. This has been rumored for a while, but I do not believe Battlefield 6 will be announced for Game Pass, at least not as a day one release. We know that EA is part of the Game Pass initiative, and eventually down the line, Battlefield 6 will likely be added to the service. But I do not expect EA to come out or Microsoft to come out and announce Battlefield 6 as a day one Game Pass release. Any thoughts on this?
I think it would be a huge get for Game Pass to get Battlefield 6.
Yes.
I mean, that game seems like it's going to be massive this year. I like the return to what looks like modern combat, as I'm kind of getting sick of World War II again, So it would be a big announcement, but I can't imagine, even if the deal was done, and who knows if it ever gets done or if it is done, I don't think EA would want to announce it so far in advance, essentially 5 months before the game comes out. I would imagine they would want to have some nice pre-order sales for the title before effectively telling everybody that, oh, you could play it for free in Game Pass. So no, I'm not expecting Battlefield to be announced for Game Pass, although I do think it makes sense to launch it day one in Game Pass, but if it does happen, that's something that would be announced much, much, much later in the year, if it happens at all.
Well, let's explore that for a sec, Rand. So let's say they don't, right? Let's say they don't announce it for Game Pass, but they do later on, and they do open up pre-orders. That wouldn't be a good look, though, would it? I mean, if people have pre-ordered the Xbox version, and then they say, oh, by the way, it's free on Game Pass day one, 2 months from now, that wouldn't be a great look for them. So I can't see that happening. Can you?
I mean, we've seen MLB The Show and Outriders. Recently, they announced Dark Alliance as well, a bigger title, not like some of the smaller indie games. And I haven't seen any backlash for people who had pre-ordered Outriders MLB The Show, because Xbox is pretty good about letting you cancel your digital pre-orders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no questions asked. Like, if you have it pre-ordered, you can just cancel it. I'm assuming the same thing, for Amazon. Like, if it's pre-order, you put your money down or you just pre-ordered it, you can easily cancel it. I don't really think that's much of an issue. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it is an issue for some people, but
yeah,
I don't think canceling your pre-order is that much of an issue for these games, especially with how their policies are on the digital side.
It's interesting. I mean, maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way, because I mean, another way to think about it is they're generating, sales numbers on the pre-orders, right? And then from there, if it's large enough, they just cut EA a check and send it to them and say, here you go, we're going to go on Game Pass day one type of thing. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, and you're right. They have done this before, but this is Battlefield 6, a bigger game, I guess. I mean, it's fair to say that. So
True.
I do wonder, how that will be received.
It is interesting. I would wonder how much money it would take for EA to be like, sure, we'll put Battlefield day one in game. Like, is EA looking at it like, okay, we think we're going to lose 4 million sales at $50 a pop or whatever, so you need to cut us a check to cover that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how like EA would look at it? I would love to know the finances of how the Outriders deal worked out, or the MLB The Show deal. Like, is Microsoft just paying for lost sales of what they would project, or and how big is that check from Satya?
Yep.
That's a good point. And yeah, I could see a title like Battlefield 6 coming down the line. Probably not this year, for the points Rand has brought up. I think EA wants to launch Battlefield 6. And, based on all the rumors out there and stuff, it's still a multiplayer focused release. So EA wants to take advantage of those microtransactions. That's why you have these 4 service games release after all. So they probably want to have it on the market for 6 months to a year before looking at a Game Pass type deal. And you can then give that user base a boom in new users by introducing Game Pass to it. So I think it's something that we will see happen, just going to be further down the line. It won't take place at E3, but we do have more rumors of potential Game Pass announcements for E3. And a recent one, and this is something that Rand has spoken on as well on his own podcast, is Bandai Namco's Scarlet Nexus. And this is a title that we saw Microsoft have exclusive marketing rights to the demo, where they had it for a full week before it came to the PlayStation platforms. And this seems like a title that is ripe for the picking for Game Pass, especially when we consider Microsoft's ambitions to expand and cater to that Japanese audience. And this is that type of project I think suits their interest well. It has Western appeal due to the anime type, visual style, and also the gameplay. And it allows them to have these discussions with major Japanese publishers and developers like Bandai Namco. And if they can find success with this type of title on their platform, and that's, ignoring the success that they have had with Square Enix and Sega with the Yakuza games, Dragon Quest, Octopath Traveler, the Final Fantasy releases, something like Scarlet Nexus just feels right in their alley. And this is something that I am anticipating to be announced for Game Pass day one at E3. How do you two feel about that?
I mean, I feel pretty good about it. Like, we know that Xbox has the marketing for this, so there's no contractual obligations preventing it, like Resident Evil 7. Remember those leaked documents or Resident Evil Village, rather,
Yes.
that showed up. I had the demo first. This month's, if you look at the Game Pass titles for the beginning of June, it was incredibly light, to the point where I was wondering, well, they must have something big that they want to announce at the showcase, where it was like, okay, this is why it's not there. Scarlet Nexus is a bigger title coming out in June. Like you said, they want to, more and more go after the Japanese audience. I think it's a no-brainer, which is why I said in my prediction video that, I said Scarlet Nexus is probably going to be announced at the show as a Game Pass day one title, because it's immediate, right? the show's the June 13th. I believe Scarlet Nexus comes out like June 21st, so the following week. So it's something tangible that you can have almost immediately instead of like a Battlefield 6 announcement, which would be 5 months down the road. This would be like, this is something I can play pretty much right away. And they probably will announce a bunch of other Game Pass like titles coming to Game Pass that day. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. A game that Xbox is co-marketing, has exclusive demo for, is releasing right around the event. We know that Xbox is looking to get bigger games in the Game Pass to drive the service because, let's be honest, their Microsoft's first party isn't necessarily holding up their end of the bargain at this point yet. It's going to be a little bit more while before they start firing on all cylinders. So the deal makes sense, I think, for everybody involved.
Yeah, I watched Rand's prediction video, and I'm going to say yes because Rand said so.
I don't know about that. I'm not always right.
No, seriously. I mean, it does feel right to me as well that Scarlet Nexus is a Game Pass game. Yeah, I mean, they got the marketing. I think it's kind of primed for a Game Pass announcement.
Now, there were two games that were in the news recently. Well, not recent. One was, and it was Persona 5 Royal. It was due to a product listing on a Korean ratings board, which was quickly dismissed as being fraudulent because there's apparently an exploit that if I self-publish a game on Microsoft Store where you can find releases like Animal Crossing, but it's not really Animal Crossing, it's just some, shovelware that some indie developer just threw on the store and named it that. It could have been related to a product like that, but there have been rumors that Persona 5 and Hades will be coming to Game Pass, and both of those feel like they could be that imminent shadow drop at E3 announcements. Definitely Hades fitting that bill more so than Persona. Do you think we could see either one of those be shadow drops during Microsoft's press conference later this week?
Want to go on this one first, MVG?
Yeah, I'm following your lead on this one because I have no idea.
Shadow dropped. I don't think Hades or Persona is going to be shadow dropped. I know Microsoft wants to remove that narrative that they don't really have that whole Japanese like games thing, right? Like they don't have Yakuza, they don't have Persona, and that's been completely rectified with all the Yakuza games, right? And I think they're working on Persona. I do believe Persona will come at some point. I'm just not sure if it's this year. Maybe it is. Maybe Microsoft says, "Hey, Persona's coming." And it would be a big announcement, even if that, the ports of those games are, let's just say, a year away. Just the announcement that they're coming would make fans really excited. I just can't see the games coming anytime soon. And Hades, I think, would be a big announcement for Game Pass. Supergiant actually hasn't released a game on Xbox since Bastion. All the way back during the 360. Like, wow. Transistor didn't come. Pyre didn't come. Is there a game in between I was thinking that they made that didn't come over? But yeah, they've completely avoided the Xbox platform since Bastion, for whatever reasons. And Hades became kind of the indie darling last year. As far as we know, there's no exclusivity with the Switch. It's just like the team's really small. And I think that would be a cool game to announce coming to Xbox through the ID at Xbox program and hitting Game Pass on day one. And it might be a title that, comes later on in the year. I just don't think they'll be shadow dropped at the show. I mean, I would love it if they were, because Hades looks like it's really cool, but I just don't see that.
I'm going to counter Rand a little bit and say that Phil cut a nice big fat check and send it to them. And
ooh.
I think it's happening.
Ooh. Which one, Persona or Hades?
Hades is coming.
You think Persona is going to come eventually?
Yeah, I think it will eventually. But you're right. I mean, the timing right now is not accurate. I think it will come at some point later on for sure.
I mean, we did see Hades on that horrendously long Xbox indie Twitch show that lasted far too many hours, and apparently Hades' representation in the logo was purely a Twitch error. Mm-hmm. And it raised everyone's hype and expectations for that presentation. And then they were all shattered immediately before the presentation took place. So there does seem to be at least some foundation to Hades coming to Game Pass. It seems as though it's more of a question of when and not if. So I would love for that to be a E3 shadow drop announcement for Game Pass, because the game is a fantastic game. It's been well received, and it's something that just suits the service incredibly well. And I think there would be a large audience of Game Pass subscribers that would have their first go with that title if it comes to the service. So I expect it will come to Game Pass, maybe not necessarily a shadow drop at E3, but I could see an announcement take place for the service at E3 at least. Are there any out there Game Pass announcements that you think could happen at E3 this year? And some of them I see out there, people say, "Oh, Final Fantasy VII Remake will be announced for Game Pass at E3."
No,
it won't.
No, it won't.
It won't. Sony secured that for another 6 months until at least December. We saw that recently with Intergrade, and the PC version of Final Fantasy VII Remake has yet to be announced. If it were to come to Game Pass, we're not hearing of any Xbox version for at least another 6 months. But is there any title that you think could be announced for Game Pass at E3 that would send shockwaves through the industry?
Shockwaves, huh?
Is that a hint?
Shockwaves.
Shockwaves.
See, the problem with that is like a lot of what you would consider shockwaves would have to be a big title, like a AAA title, like a Battlefield. And right. I just don't think publishers. I think there's still some trepidation around Game Pass that Microsoft needs to work through. Give publishers the data about how well Outriders or Knockout City or MLB The Show did, and I think a large part of these publishers also rely on pre-order sales, and that's why like something like Battlefield or something like Back 4 Blood. Announcing a Game Pass deal that far in advance, they may think might prevent their pre-order sales from taking off. So they maybe wouldn't view it as good for them. So I can't personally see a huge AAA title that's coming out, 6-8 months from now or whatever, getting announced at this show. I think it's more likely they announce Persona, even though I don't even think that's likely, but like just announcing, hey, Persona's coming and it's coming to Game Pass whenever it does because it's an older franchise. Whereas like these newer games, I think they still want to play their cards close to their chest. And there's just way too many games out there that Microsoft could announce for Game Pass that it's just like, I'd have to look at the release schedule, honestly. Like I think Scarlet Nexus would be a big announcement. I just don't know if that's like a shocking one that you want to describe it as like, ripples through the industry. That's a tough one,
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think so.
I agree. I don't think so either. I think Battlefield will come and that will be a big announcement, but for this E3, I don't see that coming. I don't see a big shockwave Game Pass announcement for the show.
Mm-hmm. So we're kind of just expecting they'll come out with several Game Pass announcements of various games, just maybe some older previous releases, but likely the only day one upcoming launch is probably something, like Scarlet Nexus or something in line with that type of tier release. We're not probably, seeing something that is just a huge AAA effort come to Game Pass, at least not in terms of an E3 announcement then.
Yes.
And you never know, Microsoft might actually like because the Game Pass team is very aggressive on social media, where they kind of always like to be in the news. So maybe they think, hey, announcing Battlefield 6 or announcing a bigger game that's far off isn't necessarily in their best interest because they can't capitalize it like they could if they announced like Battlefield the month before, where they could really drive it home. You know what I mean? Where they could really do the social media posts and things like that. So I think I do think we'll probably get a sizzle trailer of games coming to Game Pass for like newer releases and stuff. I don't know. I really do think some of the AAA publishers are still a little bit wary about Game Pass and what it can do, and they don't want to give up their pre-order sales. But I could be completely wrong. But that's just kind of my take on it.
Do you think we officially get confirmation that Microsoft is going to include Ubisoft titles on Game Pass coming later this year and basically just announce the partnership is in place, but not give that full software lineup. Do you think that could happen at this E3?
I think if they're going to announce the Ubisoft partnership on Game Pass, then they have to have at least 10 to 12 curated games ready to go. So unless they have that, I don't see that happening.
I don't think they'll announce the partnership. However, I could see them easily announcing at this show, hey, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is coming soon. Hey, Watch Dogs Legion, which just got a 60 frames patch, is coming right now.
Yeah.
Like those are sort of announcements you could make and being like, Watch Dogs Legion and Assassin's Creed Valhalla are available right now on Game Pass. And Ubisoft is putting more and more titles into their service. I don't think they'll announce the whole kit and caboodle essentially right now. Even with the EA thing, they didn't announce EA Play coming to Game Pass, I believe, until end of August, September. Because it was happening in November. So that's what I think will happen is like they'll probably maybe announce a couple of the recently released Ubisoft games hitting Game Pass like that day. And then maybe further down into the year, we get to September, October. If that deal truly does materialize and happen, then they'll announce it and being like, hey, Uplay Plus or whatever is going to be a part of Game Pass Ultimate if you have a subscription.
Yeah, I can see that play out that way. I mean, Ubisoft has a rich catalog of software and, they have had numerous releases on the Xbox platform over the years. But if we could have access to some of those legacy titles, like having the old Splinter Cell games from the original Xbox as part of a Game Pass, I think that would excite a lot of people, especially with HDR support and, increased resolution. Who wouldn't want to play, Splinter Cell from the original Xbox with HDR and 4K resolution? I know I sure would. And I'm sure a lot of Splinter Cell fans would love to return to that original trilogy of games, because it's been a long time since we've had a true Splinter Cell game. And we did see that leak this week of a Division crossover with Splinter Cell that nobody wants. So it'd be nice to give us something that we actually want. True compatibility with current gen features for those classic Splinter Cell titles.
Well, just on that real quick, Nate, I mean, you did touch on the OG Splinter Cell games. I think there will be something along the lines of more backward compatible games get announced at the show. I don't know how many we'll get, but we'll definitely get an update on backward compatibility, plus maybe some frame FPS boost stuff as well. I would expect.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've really seen any new games added to the backwards compatibility catalog, and that was because that team was busy working to get the launch of the Series X and Series S, up to par and making sure games are compatible. And they have said that they're going back to work to look at that catalog. So E3 seems like a good time to announce some brand new titles from that service. I mean, my personal hope would be something like Project Gotham or Jet Set Radio Future, but those always seem like high hopes and they'll just never materialize. But maybe this year will be the year that we finally see those titles come back to the Xbox and excite a new generation of gamer, because those titles define the Xbox in a lot of ways, especially for me. Project Gotham is one of my fondest Xbox memories of just using the kudos system and doing all the tricks and being mesmerized by the visuals. And it was a game that if you copied a CD onto the original Xbox hard drive, you could access that CD and listen to it for the game's soundtrack. So that was just a really cool feature at the time. By today's standards, that's really nothing special. But I'd love to see those type of games finally come to modern platforms again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get something. I don't know if we're going to get Project Gotham. I would love Project Gotham if we did. Jason Ronald has hinted that there is more backward compatibility coming. And what better time than E3 to unveil some more stuff?
Absolutely. And now I want to touch on acquisitions. Every time Microsoft has a presentation, acquisitions, it's always going to be brought up because Microsoft has kind of set a trend of acquisition news. And at E3 2019, I believe, is when they announced that they had acquired Ninja Theory and Double Fine. So expectation this year is certainly that Microsoft is going to announce a brand new acquisition. There are some rumors going around that this may happen. What do you think, Rand, is the realistic probability that Microsoft announces a brand new acquisition at E3?
I think there's a chance. The problem with this is acquisitions are very fluid. You know, like talks go on for a bit and then they fall apart for whatever reasons on either end. Xbox has been talking to a bunch of different studios and publishers over the course of the years, and they're currently talking to people right now. And maybe Xbox feels that a couple of those were close enough where they maybe would push to have an extra announcement during the show. Satya and Phil are both on record saying they'll look to grow inorganically wherever possible. So I do expect them to acquire more studios eventually. Of course, I wasn't necessarily thinking like this so soon after this historic Bethesda purchase. But the interesting thing I'll bring up, and I mentioned this in my video, was if you recall last year, when they announced the July Game Showcase, Aaron Greenberg and everybody from Xbox came out and was like, listen, this is only about games. There is no business-related deals at this show, which meant at the time, no pricing on Series X, no reveal of the Series S, and no acquisitions. They didn't say that this time, although it is called the Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase, which implies just games. However, they didn't come out because Xbox is all about setting expectations, recently. They didn't come out and say, hey, there's no business related dealings. It's because maybe they knew they had some things in the works that could possibly be added last minute, like a trailer, like, hey, we're welcoming in, whatever studio we did purchase. So I'm just it's like a 50-50 for me. I think it could happen, but I'm not necessarily expecting it, because I know how some of these things go. Like one day it's a go, it's happening, and then a couple days later it fell through.
Yeah,
and
right. All it takes is their legal department to say you can't talk about this right now, and it's off the table. So I agree. I mean, they may show us something, but I think if we're talking predictions, I don't think we're going to see any announcements about acquisition at this show.
Do you think there is a chance that we hear of the impending or highly rumored partnership between Nintendo and Microsoft occur at Microsoft's presentation?
You would love that, wouldn't you? Switch, Game Pass on Switch.
Who wouldn't love that?
Some Xbox fans wouldn't, because they'd be like, what are we getting out of this? We don't get anything. No, I kind of feel like that's more of a Nintendo announcement, don't you?
Yeah.
Than an Xbox announcement. That would be more like a Nintendo Direct, like, hey, Game Pass is on Switch or something, rather than like an Xbox event. That's just kind of the way I would look at it. I think that would be something Nintendo announces.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that would be something that Nintendo would want creative control over, so that they make the announcement all about their brand. Whereas if Microsoft had control over it, I could see it on both sides, because then it's Microsoft being able to say, we're bringing our awesome game content and service of xCloud and Game Pass to the Nintendo Switch. And that would excite, Xbox investors or Microsoft investors. But for Nintendo to come out in a direct or their own, press event later in the year and say, coming later today, you will have access to all of these great Microsoft published games on our platform via xCloud and Game Pass. It could go both ways for either company to take advantage of that announcement, but it does feel like something Nintendo would want control over. So I'm not anticipating any talk of Nintendo and Microsoft at E3 this year for either company. Now we can discuss some of the software that will be at E3, since we have dismissed so much. And
what is going to happen at this show, Nate? Tell us what's happening.
I think it's going to be a solid show, as we touched on. I think it's going to be good on paper. I think it's going to be an event that when we look back at, we're going to say, that was a good show. As it's happening, we're probably going to sit there and have a lot of tribulations about our feelings with it. We're not going to be, overly impressed with any particular sequence. But I think once you actually have time to marinate on your thoughts and reflect, you're going to say, that wasn't that bad overall. We know we're going to see Halo Infinite. We're going to get an update on that game. And we've been given monthly updates on the development progress of it. We've seen brand new screenshots. Some new music tracks have come out on YouTube. And the music sounds amazing. Very original Halo Combat Evolved vibes to it. I mean, you have Gareth Coker being one of the composers. And if you don't recognize the name, you'll definitely recognize the musical talent of him in titles like Ori and the Blind Forest or Ori Will of the Wisp. And anyone who's played those games know the soundtrack is just simply astonishing.
Oh, top tier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We know that we don't know. It's been highly rumored, but we will see Forza Horizon 5. It's going to take place in Mexico. And this is a title I am personally very excited for. I love the Horizon franchise. They're a ton of fun. And I can't wait to drive through Mexican locations. I want to see how they use that diversity of that environment and landscape and how they really deliver in the game, because we've gone to Australia and they did a fantastic job with the Australian landscape.
Damn right they did.
Like you drive through the outback and everything, and it was wow. Then they took us to, what was it, Great Britain in Forza Horizon 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it rained a lot, but it was hilly. It was a cool area to drive through. But Mexico, we can drive by, temples. We're going to have the coastal locations, maybe some, rainforest type sequences. I'm really excited about that release. And I mean, what are your thoughts on Forza Horizon 5 in Mexico? And when do you think the title might be releasing? And we can start with Rand on this one.
I think it's going to release in October. I definitely know there's some people out there that think Forza Motorsport's next, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I think Forza Motorsport is end of next year, if not early 2023. They did get an extra year of development, but I don't know how much that means in this work from home environment. I don't know if that means like the game's going to have some newer things that they couldn't iterate before because it was always a 2-year cycle, or if the 3 years is now like, hey, we needed 3 years because of what happened last year. I think it's going to be a stunner. Like they're going to, push the Series X to what it can do being a first party. So, 4K 60, maybe ray tracing, although I don't know if that engine can do it yet. That's like kind of what Turn 10 is doing with revamping the engine for next gen. So I expect October. I expect it to look absolutely gorgeous. It's going to play so smoothly. I'm just kind of curious what the hook is for this game. You mentioned the weather and the seasons in Forza Horizon 4. They always seem to have something, and I'm just wondering what this one is. And because I don't know, like what's left to really do, like terrain deformation, or at least more of it. But I mean, Forza Horizon is a huge franchise. I think they announced 25 million players. It's out on Steam finally. It's going to drive Game Pass. People are going to play this game, and they're always super high quality. My only real concern at this point is that the games are starting to feel a little too samey. Forza Horizon 3 and Forza Horizon 4 were very, very similar. And I'm expecting Forza Horizon 5 to be the same kind of mold, right? Mm-hmm. Where you play it and you're like, oh man, this could be 4 or 3. My hope is that at some point, Playground takes extra time, whether it's another 4 years, and really revamps the series before people really start to feel that fatigue. But maybe I'm on my own here. Maybe the people who play it constantly every single week, because it's always one of the most played games on Xbox, feel a little bit differently. But I don't know. At some point for me, I do think they need to have a facelift on the franchise, whether or not they need to add cops or for another release, or like motorcycles. But you know what I'm saying? Like the Horizon games are starting to feel a little bit like too similar. Because and maybe that's because of the release schedule. They used to come out every 2 years. So you just get done playing one and the next one's out, and it's like, man, this is the same thing. The only difference is a new location. But even with that said, I always put about 100 hours into these games when they do come out. They're always a graphical showpiece for the system, and I can't wait to play it whenever it does come out.
I don't necessarily expect the formula to change too much, at least on this game, Rand. I think what it's going to have going for it is it's just going to be, a 60 frames per second, maybe 120, ray tracing, all the new bells and whistles that comes with the Series X. You get Mexico, you get the amazing scenery, you get the Mayans. I mean, you just get, you get Mexico City, you get just some beautiful scenery that you're going to, experience. And I think that's going to be enough to carry this game, and make it successful, just like the other ones. You're right, though. I think the franchise does need a facelift, but I don't think this is the game necessarily that we get the facelift from. And I think that's okay. I mean, I think people want a new Horizon game, and Mexico's, in Mexico is going to be a pretty good experience overall for me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the game, as I said, and it may feel derivative of the previous versions, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt right now. I want to see what they have added to the game, and maybe they do have a unique hook, and we'll find out in just a few more days. Maybe they have a greater focus on like dune buggies, and we have more desert racing or that type of setting, or through the rainforest type of setting. So I'm looking forward to what they have to show us later in the week. And I think it's going to be a very popular game, as you both mentioned, once it does launch later this year. I'm a little torn on the release date. I could see it releasing in, the second half of September or the first half of October, but definitely ahead of the holiday season, because I think we can all agree we're anticipating that Halo Infinite will likely launch in November, kind of as a celebration of the Halo franchise itself, because that will mark the 20th anniversary since the original release. So I think they're going to use probably the exact same release day, if possible, as Halo Combat Evolved for Halo Infinite. But I could see them release a multiplayer flight or beta sometime this summer leading up to release, so that we all get, our hands on to maybe some of the new multiplayer modes. And I think that would be something that they would detail in full at E3. And on the topic of Halo Infinite, I think multiplayer is going to be a big focus of the game's presence for Microsoft's showcase overall. I don't think we're going to get some campaign update, but I think their focus is still going to be multiplayer. And do either one of you agree with that?
I mean, I 100% agree with you. I do think you just need to look at the key art for the show, right? It was 4 multiplayer characters. It wasn't Chief. It basically tells you that their focus is going to be on the multiplayer. We saw the campaign last year. I know people are like disappointed with how it looked, and they want some sort of side-by-side comparison update for this year, where it's like, look how it looked last year and look how it looks now and look at the big improvements. But they're not going to do that.
No, and they shouldn't do that either. They shouldn't do that. That would be the wrong approach, I think, if that was something that they were in the war room at Microsoft trying to figure out how to present this. I would have thrown that out immediately if that was ever discussed, honestly.
Yeah, and it's going to be about the multiplayer. I know people don't want to hear this, but Halo's success is going to hinge on the multiplayer. That's what and that's why it's free to play. So the whole business of the game is going to be around that. So I think we get a look at maybe a new mode. I was kind of throwing it out there, predicting that they got like a Battlefield inspired mode, like 60v60 Spartan type thing, where very Battlefield inspired, as not necessarily a battle royale, but like conquest type thing, where it's just like there's a lot of enemies on screen, a lot of vehicles and stuff like that. Kind of more of like a evolution of Warzone. And yeah, they're going to be like, hey, this is a Halo game for Halo fans. You're going to have your 4v4, you're going to have your arena, you're going to have your big team battle, you're going to have all this stuff. And I do think they will drop a sizzle trailer for the campaign. I do think we will see more of the campaign, but really quick flashes of it in like maybe a 2-minute quick cut style instead of a long 7-minute demo. But I think it focuses mostly on multiplayer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we're going to get a lot of updates of already announced software from Microsoft, and titles of that will include something like Flight Simulator. We'll probably get a release date for that. They said summer, so I could see it either maybe a potential shadow drop or maybe a July and August release. We'll also get a release date for Psychonauts 2, and I believe the release date or the release window for that has essentially leaked due to the product page going up a little early, and I believe the date was sometime in August.
Yes, and real quick on Psychonauts, I know this may not track with you guys, but I think it opens up the show with release
really.
Date. Yep.
Certainly possible.
I think they don't necessarily come out swinging with their best stuff, but they come out swinging with this game. People love Psychonauts, and this game is coming out, and you can get it in August or whenever the date was announced for it. So I think they come out with a win, basically.
Okay, maybe that would be a unique opening. I think it would confuse a lot of people. So a little mind.
Yeah, because most people are expecting Halo to open for the third time in 4 years.
Yes, you open. Yeah, I mean, you usually open with your pedigree title, but man, if Psychonauts 2 opens with a release date, I think
I could almost see Phil coming out with Halo. Halo's not. I don't feel like Halo's going to open. I feel like Halo's definitely going to be, the first 15 minutes of the show. But I can maybe see Phil come out and say, hey, we just want to update you guys on a beloved franchise and just keep it high level and then just boom straight into the Halo stuff. You know what I mean?
I was thinking Psychonauts 2 is kind of going to have its release date in the middle of the show, kind of when the roller coaster is coming down from that incline and we need to flatten out a bit. And then something big comes up so we can go back on the rise, kind of like that sizzle middle where everyone's kind of like, when's the next big thing? I was kind of expecting Psychonauts there, but they open. That'd be an interesting move. Then we're going to get updates on titles like The Gunk. This is something we haven't seen in a while.
And that's a permanent exclusive according to some of their leaked documents. Thank you, Apple versus Epic.
Is it a Game Pass release? I don't know.
Yeah, because everything they showed last year, if you remember, they said everything was launching in Game Pass, which I don't think they're going to do that this year, especially if a title like Battlefield 6 is there, right?
Sure. We'll probably get updates on Scorn, if anyone remembers Scorn.
Yep. I think we will.
Then Crossfire X. This is a title that was announced a while ago. We know that Remedy is making a campaign for the game. I believe the way this title is, or the setup for this release, is that the multiplayer is going to Game Pass, but the single player campaign made by Remedy is not Game Pass release. So I think we're going to get an update on that game. And my hope is that maybe the campaign will now join Game Pass as well. But this is a title that I think a lot of people have their eye on. We haven't seen or heard much of it in many months. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Remedy has done with Crossfire X. But I want to go into the big release or the big potential announcement, and that is codenamed Project Typhoon. We've seen articles make reference to this, and I do believe it will be at E3. I just don't know if it's going to be a title that is going to wow anyone. I think it's another one of those announcements that it's, oh, this is cool. I can't wait to see more when it gets closer to release. But it's just another one of those, this is a game that we have coming, please look forward to type of announcements, in my opinion. And I'd like to hear what you think of Project Typhoon, Rand.
I mean, yeah, like I kind of agree with you. It's one of those games that I think is like Xbox kind of planned to have more titles surrounding it, right? So it's like, here's Project Typhoon, and we'll find out what it is and who makes it at E3. And like by itself, it's maybe not too exciting, but as like, oh, here's Project Typhoon, and it's co-op multiplayer type of game. That's a cool experience. Oh, and then a couple months later, I got Avowed, or I got Starfield, where it's just like, it's more of like, it's just a game and a mist of other games that Xbox is just throwing out there. Instead, it's like, because some of the delays, a lot of people are putting a lot of expectations on the title that maybe were never supposed to be there in the first place. I think it's going to be a fun game, judging from what I know about the title. Like, is it going to be your Starfield or your Halo or your Forza? I don't think so. But again, I mean, some of this has to come down to presentation, right? Like, we're just seeing words on a piece of paper, and we're trying to be like, okay, what could that be like? Maybe the trailer impresses. And I don't know if they'll show gameplay, but it's entirely possible that like what's shown off in the gameplay, you look at that and be like, that could be a really fun time. And I'm looking forward to that. That's why it's kind of hard to judge a lot of the stuff, because you just don't know how things will show up. I thought last year's E3 was going to be amazing from Xbox. And then the presentation was lacking. Nobody really wants to see all these CGI trailers. So like, if it shows up in a bigger way with some gameplay, I think that maybe Typhoon impresses people. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When you look back at like last year's on paper, when you see titles like Fable, it's like, wow, that's exciting. but then just a CG trailer that really showed us nothing of substance beyond a frog eating a fairy and the words Fable come up. It's kind of like, well, that doesn't do anything for me. It's nice to know that you finally have confirmed Fable coming to the platform, but ultimately it was an appetizer and we don't know when the main course is coming. And that's my favorite Project Typhoon. Yes, they can give it its official name. They can even give us, a potential release window, let's say 2022 or 2023, but they have to show us some of that gameplay concept in the trailer that they present at E3 this year to really excite the fan base. And I think the only other big new announcement we get this year will be from Obsidian, and it's going to be The Outer Worlds 2. And for those who may not have been paying attention to this title's development, back in October of 2020, it was revealed via some documents that this title entered pre-production. So a reveal right now really doesn't feel that out of place, but how excited will you get over a trailer for The Outer World 2? And we could start with MVG on this one.
I would be moderately excited about it. I liked the first game a lot. I thought it had a lot of potential. Obviously, it was kind of a smaller game, but you could definitely tell what they were going for. I feel like this game is kind of the game that they wanted to make all along with The Outer World. So I think it's a pretty hype announcement. Again, I'm a big fan of the game, so I would see it. I don't know if it's going to be a real huge pop-off type of thing, but it would definitely get some buzz, I think, and it's definitely something that I'm interested in checking out for sure.
Yeah, to me, I played it on the Xbox when it came to Game Pass. I also played it on the Switch, the original Outer World, and yeah, it's a fine game. And I'm curious to see how fans would react to the announcement of an Outer Worlds 2. I mean, it was definitely well received, despite some limitations here and there, but it felt as though it did replace the Fallout franchise in the eyes of many. So it seems as though it has a good grasp of what people want from that genre that's sorely missing. And that's a good segue into, we know Bethesda is going to have a presence at the show. We don't know how substantial their presence is going to be of the 90-minute showcase. Are they only going to have a few minutes? Are they going to be potentially a full half hour? But we know they're going to bring Starfield to Microsoft's and Bethesda's E3 showcase. And the rumor is that Starfield is going to have a release date assigned to it. And that release date is going to be in the second half of 2022, potentially in Q4 of 2022. And do you feel as though they really needed to assign a release date on Starfield at E3 2021 if it's not coming out for another 15 months?
What do you say, Rand?
I don't think they need to, honestly. I think it's weird.
I think it's like a reassurance maneuver, or just saying, hey, we're going to say, let's just say it's November 2022. We want you to feel confident we're going to deliver this.
Yeah, I mean, I know they did that with Skyrim when they originally debuted it with Spike Game Awards at the time, I think it was. 11/11/11, and so it was a year in advance. Maybe they're trying to go for that same feel where it's like we're marking our territory in the sand, right, like a dog. Like, this day is ours, and Starfield's going to be absolutely massive. I'd be interesting. First off, about Starfield, I just want to know what the game is. Is it Fallout in space? Yeah. Is it like No Man's Sky or something like that? I just want to know, because it has all this hype for basically a game that we've seen nothing of. And see, some of that has to do with the fact that it's going to be exclusive, right? Exclusives always get more hype than regular multiplats. But I know MVG said he thought, and it was interesting, because I haven't heard it before, Psychonauts was going to open the show.
Yeah.
I think Starfield's going to open the show. I think they delve right into the whole Bethesda relationship. Mm-hmm. I think they show this game. I think they pound people over the head with the message that Bethesda is Xbox right from the get-go of the conference. And they show you Starfield, and hopefully it looks amazing. But that's kind of my prediction on that.
That could very well happen, Rand. That could very well happen where they basically just open up with Starfield. In exactly the same fashion that you just mentioned. I think they will. I don't know if they'll put a date on it. And maybe if they do, maybe it'll just be 2022. I think what they're going to do with this game is, you're right, they're going to illustrate the partnership between, well, the Bethesda is Microsoft, Microsoft is Bethesda. They're going to show us a lot of Starfield, and they're going to show us how big this game is, how vast the world is. And it's really going to make you subconsciously think, well, this game is huge and it's not coming out this year. And then maybe they'll just drop, 2022 at the end of it type of thing. And then people are going to walk away thinking, yeah, that makes sense because this game's massive. There's no way it's coming out this year. So, that's fine. So I think that's the way they're going to approach this, this whole thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Bethesda games that we see on display at E3 are going to be more future-related releases, and this is a title that I have reasonable confidence will be shown at Microsoft's E3 conference, and it is Arcane's Omen. This is a vampire-inspired title. Really not much known about the title itself, but I do believe it will be at Microsoft's E3 conference, and I think this should excite a lot of people. Arcane is a well-known studio. A lot of people enjoyed the Dishonored franchise, and it's been a while since we've seen a new project from Arcane. I think they also did Prey, which is now an FPS boost game on the Xbox Series X. And hopefully it's not another case of a lot of CG. This is something I want to see gameplay. I want to see proof of concept in the debut of this game at this presentation, because just with the pedigree of developer, Arcane, you have my interest, vampires. My interest is now it's further peaked, but I need to see gameplay proof of concept so I can say, okay, this is a title I'm excited for. I can't wait to see more next year when we get closer to release. Another title
it's a Microsoft show though, Nate. We're going to get some trailers, and I think this is probably one that we will get a trailer for. This is a CGI trailer all day long.
I hope you're wrong, though. Another title from Bethesda, and this is one, there really hasn't been that much talk around it beyond rumor, and it's a brand new Wolfenstein game. It feels like we're just on schedule for the next installment of the Wolfenstein trilogy. They did announce that there would be a third installment a couple of years ago. We haven't heard anything about it. And there's an expectation that it will be at E3 this year. And, I'm not overly confident that we will see Wolfenstein at E3, but I'm curious to hear your two thoughts on the prospect of seeing a brand new Wolfenstein at E3 this year. And we can start with you, MVG.
I don't even know if there will be a Wolfenstein game. I mean, I don't even know if there's one that's being developed right now. So I will say that there is no chance of a Wolfenstein 3.
Ooh, no chance. He's going out on that limb.
Yep.
No chance. I love it. For a while there, I was positive the game existed. Pete Hines talked about how the team was going to make one, and you're kind of thinking like, okay, what have they been doing all this time? And we know they're doing Indiana Jones, but we all assume Indiana Jones is super early in development, right? So it's like, okay, well, they have to be doing something, and that's something most people assumed was Wolfenstein 3. But then it's like, well, maybe they weren't doing Wolfenstein 3. Maybe they were relegated to support studio. Like maybe they were helping out on Starfield. Maybe they were helping out on Deathloop, and they weren't exactly working, the whole studio on a Wolfenstein 3 project until they landed Indiana Jones. I honestly don't know. If you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have been like 100% Wolfenstein 3 is real. It'll be at the showcase. You ask me today, and I'm not even sure it exists like MVG. Maybe a small team's working on it right now while they get through Indiana Jones, and they come back to it after Indiana Jones and finish up the trilogy. I mean, I would love for it to be announced. I love the Wolfenstein games. I love machine games, and would definitely be an extra game for Xbox to maybe come out next year or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know. I kind of agree with MVG. Like, I don't even know if it's real.
Yeah, if it is real, it's a PNG, right? It's a Metroid Prime 4 announcement.
Ooh,
at best.
That seems harsh, don't you think?
Well, yeah, but we're just trying to be honest here.
I mean, it does feel like maybe it was a project that was in development that has since fallen to the wayside. And if it doesn't show up at E3 this year, then I'm not expecting a Wolfenstein for the foreseeable future, because as you mentioned,
because they'll just do Indiana Jones. Yeah. So
I mean, and when they did speak on Wolfenstein 3, it was around the time Wolfenstein Young Blood came out, and they said, it'd be like a sequel to this game. Well, maybe that game underperformed to the point where they said, never mind. We're not going to do that third one anymore.
I do think they want to close out the trilogy, and Xbox needs as many games, for Game Pass as possible. Granted, they only just acquired them now, and it's, maybe you're right. Maybe Wolfenstein 2 underperformed to the point where they're like, we don't want to rush anything to production. You can help out on Starfield. You can help out on Deathloop that Sony's paying for. And they just didn't have anything in full production until they closed the deal with, Lucasfilm and Indiana Jones. It's very interesting because I think we can safely assure Starfield will be there from Bethesda, and
yes.
Like Omen, maybe even updates about Fallout 76 or Elder Scrolls Online. Would they do you think maybe even potential ZeniMax talks about their new game that they have that they're working on, that Quentin Cobb's over there with the team from the Naughty Dog and the game they're building? Do you think there's a chance we see that too? Or
I think that's held for like an X1 or the Game Awards, because I feel like their real big focus, they want Starfield to be front and center.
Yeah,
that's our big gameplay debut, and then you have Omen. You don't really want to talk about another way distant project.
But I feel like you want more from Bethesda from your first thing, where it's like, yeah, Starfield's nice and Omen, but that's just 2 games. And Bethesda is a publisher that always used to have more than that during their showcase. And granted, they're not going to be able to talk about Deathloop or Ghostwire Tokyo because they're PlayStation games at this point. I don't know. I kind of feel like there has to be more than just 2 new announcements from Bethesda, especially if it's a 90-minute show. If we assume an hour for Xbox and 30 minutes in between wherever for Bethesda, doesn't really seem like a lot. That's why maybe a lot of this stuff is somewhat exciting, because you don't really know, like if Wolfenstein will or won't show up or stuff. I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of possibilities that they could go for, but by now being that console exclusive, or for the majority of upcoming releases at least, they're not going to have that type of show where where traditionally saw Bethesda come out and be like, oh, here's Elder Scrolls Blades for Switch, and that would take up 5 minutes of the show, or here's Skyrim for Switch, another 5 minutes. Now, if they have to be a little more regulated to just the Microsoft stuff because it is the Microsoft show, you could be potentially looking at a slightly more limited showcase of what's on the slab at the studios. But they could also say, here's Doom Eternal Xbox Series X version. Like we've gone, we've overhauled the game completely. So they do have other avenues that they can explore, and it will be interesting at how they approach it this year, because I think this is going to set the tone moving forward of what we expect from Bethesda at Microsoft shows, in subsequent years. But it's going to be an interesting display of how Bethesda is integrated into this presentation, because as we said, it's a 90-minute show. Could it be 30 minutes is relegated to Bethesda showcases? We don't know are they going to separate the two, or are they just going to seamlessly blend together? We really don't know how this is going to be handled, but it's definitely something that I am interested in, and I'm excited to see what Bethesda does have in development, be it a brand new Wolfenstein or maybe an update on Indiana Jones. But as you mentioned, we can confidently say we will see Starfield, we will see Omen, and maybe those 2 are enough to excite fans, especially on the Xbox space, of what Bethesda has in store moving forward for the platform. And it should be a fun show overall for Bethesda. And to close out the topic, I want each of you to give me your preliminary thoughts and general hype level for the Microsoft Bethesda conference based on what we have said, and just your general expectation going into it. And we can start with MVG. What's your hype level going into the Microsoft showcase?
Well, you mentioned earlier that on paper these shows always look really good, and we talked about last year. On paper it looked like a great show, and it kind of just didn't really deliver what we had expected. I think Microsoft has looked at last year and they've learnt a lot from last year's show. I am quietly confident that this show will be a good one. I'm not trying to get my hype levels up too high this time around. I think last year I was really hyped for Halo, and it did disappoint me a little bit. So at the end of the day, I think this show will be a solid 7.5, maybe an 8, depending on execution. I think honestly, at the end of the day, even if they drop the Starfield, and they show us Forza Horizon, and they show us Halo, and all three of those have solid gameplay portions that really does nail home that these games are why you need an Xbox in 2021 and beyond. Then that's enough for me. Everything else is gravy. So those three games are the big ones for me. Everything else that they have on the show is extra. Look, I think the show will be a good show. 90 minutes. They will have some good stuff to show us. They'll have some surprises. And look, I do think it will be better than last year. And like I said, Nate, I think a 7.5 is where I give it. Maybe an 8. And hopefully, if it's better than that, then I'm walking away feeling really good about Xbox.
Sounds fair. How about you, Rand?
I think it's going to be a solid show. With the potential of being a great one. I think presentation matters. I thought last year's show was going to be amazing, and the presentation was a little bit lacking in that regard, so it dropped it down for me. So I think this year is going to be a very solid show, and they're going to have some really good announcements, especially when you take in the factor of what's going on everywhere in the world with game development right now. I think Xbox is going to put on, they're going to have games that they're going to announce, and it's gameplay, hopefully, because I think that's the lesson they learned from last year. And it's really just depends, like MVG said, about like presentation, like how these games show up is going to be important. How Halo looks, are people excited about the multiplayer? Does Starfield look really impressive? And if it does, Starfield looks like the next huge thing, the first new IP from Bethesda in 25 years, that could be enough to really excite people. And then you add on those individual announcements of Project Typhoon and Omen and a game from Arcane and some really solid Game Pass titles. I think the show in that regard would probably be considered a success. Maybe not necessarily 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, but like where we are in the world right now, a very, very solid show and a really, really good show with the potential of being something great, just depending on how all these games, show up, right?
Yeah, I think you both bring up good points, and presentation is definitely the big point. I think that should be emphasized is that if the presentation of the show is quality, there's good pacing to it, and we don't really hit that drag in the middle, that we're going to walk away from it probably feeling more confident in Microsoft and what the future holds for the brand than we would if it's 40 minutes of a high quality show, limited then by half an hour of a drag, but then ending on a high point. But as you mentioned, Rand, if Starfield comes with a very strong showing, that could potentially alter the entire perception of the show. Let's say Starfield opens and it's the first 15 minutes and it's a strong gameplay demonstration and it's just, wow, this game looks fantastic. And then Halo Infinite ends the show and the multiplayer looks just enthralling. And they announce that there's going to be a public beta available later this week or, following the E3 show. You're probably going to walk away with that high of this was fantastic. And you could forget that drag in the middle. It's kind of like a video game. If you open on a high and close on a high, you don't remember everything in between. You don't remember all the recycled content. But overall, I think it is going to be a solid show. I'm excited to see Halo again. I'm excited to see Forza Horizon 5 in Mexico, Starfield, Arcane with Omen, and, updates on titles like Crossfire X. I'm excited for these updates. And as you mentioned, Game Pass. If they do come out and say Scarlet Nexus is coming to Game Pass, and then we have that Game Pass sizzle reel of, previously released games, be it like an Assassin's Creed Valhalla is coming to Game Pass later this month or, next month. That's a quality show overall, but I do agree. I don't think it's going to be a show that's going to have us jumping up and down for joy saying, oh my God, I can't wait. It may not even be a show that makes you run out and have to buy an Xbox following the presentation itself. But those who own an Xbox, I think are going to walk away from the show saying, I'm glad I have this platform. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. And Microsoft succeeded in what they had to do at this particular showcase. We're still going to be hungry for updates on titles like Hellblade 2, Avowed, Perfect Dark, Fable, and so many other titles. But it looks like there's a nice menu of options that will be served to us eventually. Yeah. Project Typhoon, it's going to come down to presentation, as you mentioned. If they can integrate some gameplay in that, debut trailer, we may be walking away from it on a high. If it's just pure CG, we're going to feel indifferent. So hopefully Microsoft has learned that presentation is important. You can't lean on CG or just icons and game logos too much. We need to see that gameplay. We need to walk away having an idea of what we're getting, and that's what's going to instill confidence. But overall, I am expecting a very fun show from Microsoft, and I'm really looking forward to the presentation in a little less than a week. So
what do you give it out of 10?
Let's see what E3 brings.
What do you give it out of 10?
I'm going to be harsh on them, and I'm going to come in at a 7, just based on the idea we're going to get a lot of CG.
Yeah, I mean 7 is a good number because it could go up. You've got room to improve there, or it could just be a disaster, which I don't think it will be, as mentioned this year.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, I'm hopeful that it will be a stronger show. If we do see a lot of stuff that isn't CG and we see a lot more gameplay, my score could easily go up to an 8, 8.5. Right now, I'm going to come in with a little harsher score, with lower expectations, with room for them to wow me.
Yeah.
And I hope they do wow me, because we're going to get the gameplay from Halo. We're going to get the gameplay from Forza Horizon 5. And knowing that that's what we're going to get, I already kind of factor that into my score.
Yeah.
But Forza Horizon 5 could, astonish with what it has for a gameplay demonstration by introducing new concepts. And that's what I want to see from them. And this is something I would hold for any studio. And that's even a point I'll repeat in our upcoming Nintendo E3 predictions video. I'm very harsh on Nintendo. I don't like when they just come in with pure safe announcements. I want to see that risk. I want to see that gamble. And in some ways, Microsoft does feel like they take things a little safe with these presentations. And maybe that's one of their problems from recent years, is that it just feels like, yeah, we knew this was coming. Thank you for the update, but you never wowed us with anything brand new.
Yeah.
It feels as though they could wow us with some brand new stuff, be it Project Typhoon, Omen, Starfield even. So I'm definitely, if I'm an Xbox fan and I'm a big Microsoft fan, I'm definitely feeling hopeful going into the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of good feeling around this year. And like I said, I feel pretty confident that they will have looked at last year and come up with something a lot better this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel as though Microsoft looks at their past presentations and they try to learn from them. And, you're still limited by what you have to work with. And we know the industry was challenged over the last year due to the pandemic. So we should probably be thankful overall that there's even an E3 happening this year. So even if the show's not perfect, we still got a chance to celebrate the industry and got some quality updates on some exciting projects that are coming out this year and into next year. And I think that's the important takeaway overall, is that we're still going to see a lot of exciting things and plenty to look forward to. And our guest, Randall Thor, had to leave a little early this week before we got into the Streamlabs questions. So we'd like to thank him for joining us. You can find a link to his channel in the YouTube script description below. And now we're going to move into the Streamlab questions of the week. And our first question is from Jackie G, who donated $1, who writes, "What are Monolith Productions up to? A new Middle-earth game or something else? I believe they are working on a new Middle-earth game, and it could potentially be announced at E3 later this week. So that's something to keep an eye on. I did enjoy the first 2 Middle-earth games that Monolith Productions produced, and that Nemesis system is something that was really ingenious. Hopefully they're able to flesh it out a little more. But I am curious as to how they approach this one in terms of gameplay, see if they do a new exciting gimmick, because it's been quite a number of years since we've seen a Middle-earth title." We then had a $1 donation from Liam Warner, who writes, "Nate, why did the Grinch leak make you more upset than usual? You get heated about terrible business practices and toxicity towards insiders, and very rightly so. And even for you, that incident seemed to push you a little more than usual, because I had around half a dozen friends get dozens, if not more, death threats sent to them every day for the better part of a week. And that's just unacceptable behavior. This is video games. It's meant to be fun. And you have to remember, you can be the best insider in the world. Information changes at any given second. The industry is very fluid. Nothing is the same as it was a moment ago. And to go after people and send death threats or to abuse and harass them is just unnecessary behavior. It should never be acceptable in the game industry or any industry or in life. It's something that has to be called out. And yeah, I took it very personally because I also had death threats sent to me. And it was all over the idea that people were saying, well, the Grinch leak is real. And all anyone else was saying was, no, that leak isn't real. That image is fake. Those characters aren't going to be in Smash Brothers. And to respond to people just trying to help to give you a better idea of what to expect from the Smash characters roster, to send them death threats is just, it's very disturbing.
Yeah, well said. I mean, you know, people sometimes forget there's a human side to all this. And, you know, you quite rightly pointed that out, that this is no joke, you know, when people get sent death threats and get doxxed and all that stuff just over video games. It really does make you wonder, you know, some people just need to go outside and just take a long walk and just relax, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, none of the individuals I knew personally who were getting the death threats, I mean, they didn't come out and say this leak is fake for any of their benefit. They were doing it for the community. They wanted people to, you know, they wanted to educate and inform the community that the leak, it wasn't even a leak, it was just a rumor, wasn't legitimate, so that you didn't have your expectations high to be dashed once it came to Earth, that it wasn't real. And just to see that type of response from people is just, it's just really hurtful. We then had a $5 donation from Like a Boss. Right, we know Nintendo owns the Japanese gaming market, topping the hardware sales. Square Enix is a Japanese company that make amazing games like Final Fantasy VII Remake. What are your guys' thoughts about Final Fantasy VII Remake coming to Switch Pro? Also thoughts on Red Dead Redemption 2 coming to Switch Pro?
I don't think either of those games will come to Switch Pro. And I say that because the Switch Pro has to be cartridge compatible with the Switch.
Yes.
Which means they haven't really solved the problem of large storage media. Plus, the other technical reasons why I don't think Final Fantasy VII Remake is suited towards the Switch Pro. I think hardware spec-wise, assuming the specs are what we get based on Bloomberg's report, yes, I think it is capable of running the game. I just feel like the storage media part of this is going to be the ultimate roadblock. Same thing applies for Red Dead Redemption 2. It runs on 2 Blu-ray discs. It's a very big game, and I think it's very hard to either tell people, hey, you need to buy a 250 gigabyte SD card to play this game, and that's the only thing you can put on the cart. I know I'm exaggerating because it's not that big, but you know what I'm saying. I think it's just those games aren't suited for the Switch Pro, and I can't see them coming to the system.
Yeah, I'd give them a low percentage chance. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. So if Square really wanted to make it happen, they may find a way to do it, but I wouldn't anticipate it anytime soon. And even if they somehow found a way to make it happen, we probably wouldn't hear about it until a year from now, so sometime in 2022. But yeah, I'm not anticipating Final Fantasy VII Remake to come to the Switch or Switch Pro unless they try like a cloud version.
Yep.
And even though the title is Unreal Engine 4, there are still, you can only scale the game so far before it's essentially not even the same game. So there would still be technical challenges. And you can look at Final Fantasy VII just on a base PS4. Certainly playable, but there were some limitations in place. And, you know, to bring it to a Switch Pro, you'd likely have to scale even further back. So is there there's potential, but I would say it's very low percentage chance. We then had a $1 donation from Lee, who writes, is Ninja Gaiden Z worth it? Because I have never played any of the other Ninja Gaiden games, and I have already pre-ordered the physical collection. Yes, Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 are the pinnacles of their genre. Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge is satisfactory, certainly a playable game, has value as far as entertainment goes, but Ninja Gaiden 1 and Ninja Gaiden 2 should absolutely be played, so picking up the Sigma collection will definitely give you plenty of quality game time, so I'd say it is a good purchasing decision by you. We then had a $10 donation from Nintendo, who writes, "Hey, Nate and MVG. Just want to say thank you for your awesome work you do with this podcast. I get excited every time a new episode comes up. I still have a question for both of you. What is your favorite game franchise? Greetings from Switzerland."
Metroid.
Ooh. Really?
Yeah.
Metroid. Okay. My favorite game franchise. I'd probably say The Legend of Zelda. If I want to go something a little more modern, I would probably say Uncharted or Gears of War. We then had a $5 donation from Blue Ink Blot, who writes, "Will Campos Santos' next game, In the Valley of Gods, ever see the light of day? Or has Valve doomed that project? I know our favorite Firewatch developers were called to help on Half-Life Alyx, but that's all we've ever heard of them." That is a great question, and I actually looked into this a bit, and I cannot find a single update regarding In the Valley of Gods. I hope it does release, because I'm a big fan of Ollie Moss's artwork, and there's really no new information out there concerning the status of this game beyond that it was indefinitely put on the shelf so that the development team could lend assistance on Half-Life Alyx, but hopefully they're able to return to it soon and get that project out. But yeah, there's really nothing new to share on that front. We then had a $5 donation from Robin, who writes, "With the return of E3, I started to think about my most hype moment from E3 in recent years, and it has to be The Last Night from Odd Tales a few years ago during the Xbox press conference. Haven't heard from that game since. Any word on its progress?" I forgot that game was a thing, actually.
Yeah, same. It's just fallen off the face of the earth, that game. I haven't heard nothing about it.
No, I have not heard of that game in years now, and sometimes with an indie game, you bite off more than you can chew. You get the announcement out and something falls apart. Maybe funding doesn't come together. It's really tough to keep track of indie games and where their status is. But yeah, I haven't seen any update concerning that title. We then had a $4.14 donation from Matanume, who writes, "Mario Sunshine. Some shine missions just aren't fun. The linear progression, poor use of blue coin collecting, but Flood feels great. Tropical theme is unique despite the game lacking serious polish. What could they have done to make it a better game? They could have polished it and not rushed it to market."
They could have removed Flood.
The one thing they say positive about the game.
Yep. It would have been infinitely better if they just removed Flood from the game.
I mean, I do agree with that. I think the Flood free levels that you play are some of the best Mario platforming stages in the franchise's history. It's just so many things about that game that were just unpolished, unoptimized. Yeah. I mean, everyone knows how I feel about Mario Sunshine. We then had a $100 donation from Shamsa, who this episode is dedicated to. Thank you for your donation and continue support, Shamsa. We then had a $1 donation from Brandon Wells, who writes, I hear a lot of people say that cross-gen games hold back the new-gen games. How much of that is true? Breath of the Wild was on the Wii U, and that's a great game. I think Horizon and God of War will play and look great too. What do you think, MVG?
This is a really tough question to answer at the end of this show, because we can go pretty deep on this, but
yes,
I think it does. But, when I say it does, I'm not saying it's a negative thing or it's, it's always going to be a negative thing. But look, at the end of the day, if you've got a game like God of War or Gran Turismo 7 that is being targeted to run on a machine that was launched in 2013, as well as a next generation or a current generation system that takes advantage of features such as SSD, ray tracing, 4K, 120 frames per second. Yes, but by definition, it is holding back that version. So I do think it is. I don't want to get into it in this episode. Maybe it's a topic that we'll dive into at some point. But yeah, I think it is for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely aspects that can be held back. And as MVG is mentioning, this could be a topic that we dive into the future. Maybe we can bring on a developer or two who has worked extensively on cross-gen games, be it this generation or even last generation, to really get some firsthand perspective. Not to say MVG doesn't have it, but just to have another take on the matter so that we can really give a proper context into the conversation, because this is certainly a matter where some may say no and others will say yes, but something that we can return to in the future. Then had a $5 donation from Luca. Right, hi guys. Not sure if you can talk about this. When I got my Switch late, I kicked myself because I couldn't homebrew it. I'm unsure about buying the Pro day one. Would you say it's worth it in case the early models have exploits that might get patched?
It's always interesting to buy a day one new system, and look, if Bloomberg's report is accurate, that is, there is a new chip in there, then yeah, there is some merit in buying a day one system and just kind of putting it aside for the chance that maybe it can be exploited. It's probably your best chance. But having said that, this is a revision of the Switch. So, there's going to be a lot of this that just carries over. And I'm talking about things like the firmware and stuff like that. So I would expect it probably won't be exploitable. But, there's an outside chance, I will say, based on the fact that it is new hardware. And look, when the Switch Lite came out, that even though that ran Mariko, there was an exploit for that was discovered as well. So there is some chance, I will say, but I would also temper expectations as well that it's probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Then had a $5 donation from The Dark Void. Right, hi. With E3 coming this week, what is your weirdest out of left field production? Mine is that a new Banjo and Kazooie game announced at Nintendo's E3 Direct, or Sub-Zero or Scorpion announced for Smash Brothers. Go Braves. Go Braves. I can't say anything because the Yankees are awful, but...
What's your biggest left field announcement?
My biggest left field weirdest prediction? Oh boy. Samus Pilot Wings.
That's a good one.
Pilot the ship and actually sounds kind of too realistic. Shit. What's yours? What's your wildest prediction you can come up with?
I was going to say Silent Hill, but there's really no platform for that game to come back at E3 because Sony's not going to be there and Konami's not going to be there. So that's probably off the table. Other than that, I think, something from Nintendo that we're not expecting. Maybe they give us an F-Zero game, which, okay. I think on paper is probably not something that they're even interested in. But there's been some talk about F-Zero. I'm not saying it's anything substantial, but I would like to see an F-Zero game. So that's what I'm going to say.
That's what it is. Microsoft bought the F-Zero IP from Nintendo, and they gave it to Turn 10.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. And that was our final Streamlabs question for this week. If you'd like to support the channel, we have a Streamlabs link in our description below. Make a donation of any amount, ask a question. We will answer it at the end of the episode. If you donate $100 or more, we will dedicate the episode to you. And today's episode is once again dedicated to Shamsa. And we thank you again for your generosity and continued support. And I'd like to thank my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer, for joining me as always.
Thanks for having me on, Nate. And I know Rand had to dip, but it was great having him on as well.
It was great to have Rand on for this conversation. You can find links to both of their YouTube channels in the description below. You can also check out MVG's latest video where he plays Gears of War 3 on the PlayStation 3, and he explains why he was able to play it, why it was ever on the PlayStation 3, and you get a firsthand look at some of the incredible gameplay footage of the title on PlayStation 3. So be sure to check that out. And we will be back later this week with our Nintendo E3 predictions, and we will have Jeff Grubb as a special guest in that episode. So be on the lookout for that. Let us know your thoughts on Microsoft's E3 presentation in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, give the video a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We will see you again in a couple of days. And until then, continue to embrace the hate.